Good Thursday morning, Patriots. 9 people are dead in Canada, and the media won't tell you why. 2 days ago, Tuesday, February 10th, a mass shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, devastated a town of only 2,400 people. 5 children, ages 12 and 13, murdered in their school library. A 39-year-old teacher dead. The shooter's own mother and 11-year-old stepbrother killed at home. 27 others injured. The shooter dead by suicide. Within hours, Canadian authorities started the cover-up. Not about what happened, but about who did it. Royal Canadian Mounted Police called the shooter a gunperson. Not a gunman, a gunperson. Deputy Commissioner Dwayne McDonald used female pronouns while describing the massacre. When reporters asked about the shooter's biological sex, police refused to answer. The shooter was Jesse Van Rootsteller, an 18-year-old biological male who started transitioning at age 12, the same age as most of his victims. And Patriots, this is the 6th trans or non-binary mass shooter in 8 years, the 4th to target a school. Every single time, mental illness is ignored, gender ideology affirmed, social media scrubbed, manifestos buried, and the legacy media plays cover-up for a movement getting children killed. This is O'Connor's Right Stand. I'm John O'Connor, software programmer by day, conservative truth seeker by night. Today, we are breaking down what happened in Tumbler Ridge, why police lied about basic biology while bodies were still warm, the pattern legacy media refuses to discuss, and what happens when ideology matters more than children's lives. The Right Stand starts now. Let me paint the picture for you, because you need to understand just how small and tight-knit this community is. Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, population 2,400, over 600 miles north of Vancouver in the foothills of the Canadian Rockies. Remote, isolated, the kind of town where everybody knows everybody. Mayor Daryl Krakoka said it perfectly. I will know every victim. I've been here 19 years. We are a small community. I don't call them residents, I call them family. That's the kind of place we are talking about, where a school shooting doesn't just devastate families, it devastates an entire town. Tuesday afternoon, 1:20 p.m. local time, Jesse Van Rootsteller starts his rampage at home. Shoots and kills his 39-year-old mother, Jennifer Strang. Shoots and kills his 11-year-old stepbrother. Then he heads to Tumbler Ridge Secondary School, a tiny high school with only 160 students, grades 7 through 12. He dropped out 4 years earlier, but he knew the layout. He knew where to go. He walked into that school armed with a long gun and a modified handgun. Neither registered to him. His firearms license had expired in 2024, meaning he shouldn't have had access to guns at all. And Patriots, here's where it gets absolutely heartbreaking. Most of the victims were found in the school library. 3 12-year-old girls, 2 boys, ages 12 and 13, a 39-year-old female teacher. 1 victim was found in a stairwell. Think about that. Children the same age as when Jesse Van Rootsteller started his gender transition 6 years ago. 12 years old, reading books in the library, and this monster walks in and murders them. Police arrived within minutes. They found Van Rootsteller dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But the carnage was massive. 27 people injured. 2 were airlifted out in critical condition. Over 100 students evacuated with their hands up, searched by police before being reunited with parents who'd been waiting in agony at the community center. 9 dead, 27 injured, in a town of 2,400 people. Do the math on that, Patriots. That's over 1% of the entire town either dead or wounded in a single afternoon. This is one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings in decades, second only to the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal, where 14 people died. And the question everyone should be asking is, How does an 18-year-old with documented mental health issues and an expired firearms license and a history of police visits to his home for mental health crises get access to 2 firearms and murder 9 people while injuring 27 others? But that's not the question Canadian authorities want you asking. They want you focused on pronouns instead of prevention. Here's where the story goes from tragic to infuriating, Patriots. Within hours of the shooting, Canadian police started the cover-up. Not about what happened, but about who did it. The initial RCMP alert described the suspect as a female in a dress with brown hair. That went out to the public as an active shooter warning. Then came the press conference. Royal Canadian Mounted Police North District Commander Chief Superintendent Ken Floyd stepped up to the microphone, and he described the shooter as a gun person. Not a gunman, a gun person. Let that sink in. 9 people are dead, 27 injured, children murdered in their school library, and Canadian police are so committed to gender ideology that they can't even use basic English to describe the shooter. But it does get worse. Wednesday's press conference, Deputy Commissioner Dwayne McDonald, the commanding officer for the RCMP in British Columbia, gives an update. He finally releases the shooter's name, Jesse Van Rootsteller, 18 years old, resident of Tumbler Ridge. And then McDonald says this, and I'm quoting directly, "I can say that Jesse was born as a biological male who approximately 6 years ago began to transition to female and identified as female, both socially and publicly." Okay, so he admits the shooter is a biological male, born male, is male, but then McDonald adds, "We identify the suspect as they chose to be identified in public and social media." Translation: we are going to lie about basic biology because we care more about pronouns than truth. Throughout the entire press conference, McDonald used female pronouns. He called this male shooter she and her over and over and over, while describing the murder of 9 people and the injury of 27 others, including dozens of children. When reporters from the Daily Wire asked the RCMP to confirm the shooter's sex, you know what the official spokeswoman said? Quote, "We are unable to confirm identity publicly at this time." Unable to confirm? You just told us he was born male. You just said he transitioned 6 years ago. What exactly are you unable to confirm? This is state-enforced delusion. This is the Canadian government forcing its officers to lie about objective reality while children's bodies are being removed from a school. And the irony is staggering. Canada has a law, Bill C-16, that compels speech. It forces you to use someone's preferred pronouns or you can face legal consequences. Jordan Peterson became famous fighting against that law because he understood where it would lead. Well, here we are. 9 people dead, 27 injured, and Canadian police are so terrified of misgendering a mass murderer that they call him a gun person and use female pronouns while describing his male body. This isn't compassion. This isn't respect. This is madness. Now here's what makes this story even more important, Patriots. This isn't a one-off. This isn't an isolated incident. This is the 6th trans or non-binary mass shooter in 8 years, and the legacy media refuses to acknowledge the pattern. Let me walk you through the list because you need to hear this. September 2018, Aberdeen, Maryland. Snokia Mosley, 26-year-old biological male, identifying as a trans woman, opens fire at a Rite Aid warehouse. 3 killed, 3 wounded. Friends confirm Mosley was on hormone treatments. May 2019, Highlands Ranch, Colorado. STEM school. Alec McKinney, 16-year-old biological female identifying as a trans male, partners with another student to shoot up a classroom during graduation week. 1 hero student killed trying to stop them, Kendrick Castillo, 18 years old. 8 others wounded. McKinney admitted targeting transphobic classmates who bullied him. Sentenced to life in prison plus 38 years. November 2022, Colorado Springs, Club Q nightclub. Anderson Lee Aldrich identifies as non-binary. 5 killed, 40 wounded at an LGBTQ nightclub before patrons stopped him. Sentenced to life. March 2023, Nashville, Tennessee. Covenant School. This is the big one, Patriots. Audrey Aiden Hale, 28-year-old biological female identifying as a trans male, walks into a Christian elementary school. 3 adults dead. 3 9-year-old children dead. And here's what makes Nashville so damning. Hale left a manifesto, pages and pages of anti-white hate. Quote, "Kill those little crackers with their white privilege." The FBI buried that manifesto for 8 months. It finally leaked in November of 2023, and the content was exactly what we suspected. Radical ideology, mental illness, and murderous rage. When the FBI finally released 112 pages of Hale's writings in May 2025, they showed anti-Christian diatribes, maps of the school, faculty lists. One diary entry read, "I'm a sad boy born with a puny vagina." Another, "I need a trans doctor. This female gender role makes me want to not exist." This wasn't some random act of violence. This was ideologically motivated. It was buried because it didn't fit the narrative. August 2025, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Annunciation Catholic School. Robert Robin Westman, biological male identifying as trans woman. 2 children killed, ages 8 and 10. 17 wounded, most of them children. Westman's manifesto said, and I'm quoting, "I am tired of being trans. I wish I never brainwashed myself." The shooter regretted his transition. He called it brainwashing, and then he murdered children during the first mass of the school year. And now, February 2026, Tumbler Ridge, Canada. Jesse Van Rootsteller, 9 dead, 27 injured, 4th trans shooter to specifically target a school in 8 years. Do you see the pattern? Because I sure do. 6 shooters. Trans population is less than 1% of Americans and Canadians, but they are committing mass shootings at a rate vastly disproportionate to their population size. 4 of these 6 targeted schools, children, the most vulnerable victims. Multiple shooters had manifestos showing mental illness, rage, and in at least 2 cases, regret over their transitions. And in every single case, social media gets scrubbed immediately. YouTube deletes channels. Reddit bans accounts. The digital evidence vanishes before independent researchers can archive it. Now, some of you remember what happened after the Nashville shooting? Trans activists organized a Trans Day of Vengeance, scheduled for March 31st to April 2nd, 2023. The goal, quote, "Stop trans genocide by raising money for firearms." That's right. After a trans shooter murdered 6 people, the response from the trans movement was to arm more trans people. Activist Kayla Denker, who goes by Pinko Scum, posted a video loading an AR-15 with a caption saying, "If transphobes come for him, he's taking a few with me." T-shirts showed up at rallies with images of AK-47s and M16s with the slogan, "Trans rights or else." California State Senator Scott Wiener, a Democrat, framed the political debate over transgenderism in apocalyptic terms, warning about the war on trans people. This is radicalization, Patriots. This is a movement that's telling mentally unstable people they are under attack, they are facing genocide, and they need to arm themselves. And what's the media's response? Silence. They won't discuss the pattern. They won't ask the hard questions. They just scrub the evidence and move on to the next news cycle. Let's talk about what every one of these shooters has in common, because it's not just their trans identity, it's their mental illness. Jesse Van Rootsteller, police had been in his home multiple occasions over the past several years for mental health concerns. Deputy Commissioner McDonald confirmed some of those calls involved weapons. The most recent visit was spring of 2025 for concerns about self-harm. This kid had been in crisis for years. Police knew it. And yet somehow, he still got access to firearms and murdered 9 people while wounding 27 others. Audrey Hale in Nashville. Diary entries showing pain, desire to die, mental anguish. Quote, "Why does my brain not work right? 'Cause I was born wrong. Nothing on earth can save me. Never-ending pain." Robin Westman in Minneapolis. Manifesto literally says, "I wish I never brainwashed myself." Alec McKinney in Colorado admitted plotting revenge for bullying, took cocaine before the attack. Every single one documented mental health issues, and every single one was affirmed in their delusion instead of getting real help. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Gender dysphoria is a mental health condition. It's psychological distress about one's biological sex. And the treatment being pushed by activists isn't therapy, it's affirmation. Tell the confused 12-year-old boy that he's actually a girl. Put him on puberty blockers. Give him cross-sex hormones. Surgically alter his body. And when none of that fixes the underlying mental illness, because it can't, act shocked when violence erupts. There's a Swedish study from 2011 that tracked people who went through gender transition surgeries. The findings? Female to males had higher crime rates than biological females. They committed violent crimes at rates matching biological males. Why? Because pumping testosterone into a female body doesn't make you a man. It makes you an aggressive, confused woman on male hormones. And we are seeing this play out in real time. Alec McKinney was a biological female on testosterone who helped murder a classmate. Audrey Hale was a biological female on testosterone who murdered 6 people. Robin Westman regretted his transition and murdered children. The ideology is creating the very violence it claims to prevent. Think about that. Jesse Van Rootsteller for a second. Started transitioning at age 12. That's 6th or 7th grade, Patriots. You can't legally buy a beer, get a tattoo, or sign a contract. But in Canada, you can consent to life-altering medical interventions that will sterilize you and mess with your brain chemistry forever. And when that 12-year-old grows into an 18-year-old with unresolved mental illness, a history of suicidal ideation, and police visits to his home for weapons concerns, what happens? He murders 9 people, including 5 children, the same age he was when this nightmare started for him. And he wounds 27 more. What percentage of these shooters do you think regret their transitions? We know at least 2 explicitly said so in their manifestos. How many others felt the same way but didn't write it down? And here's the question that should haunt every politician, every doctor, every activist pushing gender ideology on children. How many more people have to die before we admit this treatment is creating monsters instead of healing broken kids? Let me ask you something. If your 12-year-old came home confused about their gender, would you put them on life-altering drugs? Or would you get them real mental health treatment to address whatever pain they are experiencing? Because I guarantee you, the pain isn't about their body. It's about something deeper. And no amount of hormones or surgery is going to fix that. You want to know how you can tell this story is dangerous to the narrative? Watch how the legacy media covers it. CNN, NBC, CBC, BBC, they all reported the shooting. Of course they did. 9 dead, 27 injured, including multiple kids? Well, that's news. But watch the language they use. Watch what they emphasize and what they bury. Most headlines? Shooting in Canada leaves 9 dead. Tumbler Ridge mass shooting. Canada mourns after school attack. Generic. Could be any shooting. No indication of who did it or why. When they mention the shooter's identity, it's buried deep in the article. And when they do mention it, they use the exact same deceptive language the RCMP used. Quote from CNN, "The suspect was assigned male at birth and began transitioning to female 6 years ago." Assigned male at birth. That's the euphemism they use to avoid saying born male or biological male, as if sex is something doctors randomly assign instead of something they observe. NBC. Police say the shooter identified as a female. No mention that the shooter was male, just identified as, like that's what matters. And none of them, not CNN, not NBC, not the New York Times, will discuss the pattern. They won't mention Nashville. They won't mention Minneapolis. They won't mention that this is the 4th trans shooter to target a school. Why? Because acknowledging the pattern means asking uncomfortable questions about gender ideology. It means examining whether affirming mentally ill children is actually helping them or setting them up for catastrophe. The legacy media would rather let more kids die than question the narrative. And when conservative outlets do point out the pattern, when Breitbart or the Daily Wire or Post Millennial report the facts, they get accused of spreading hate, of targeting trans people, of being transphobic. No, reporting truth is not hate. Identifying a pattern of violence is not bigotry. Warning that an ideology is radicalizing mentally ill people and getting children killed is not targeting anyone. It's trying to save lives. Here's what they won't tell you. Trans people are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. That's statistically true. The vast majority of trans individuals are not violent, but that doesn't mean we ignore the ones who are, and especially doesn't mean we ignore the ideological elements that are radicalizing unstable people. When a white supremacist commits violence, the media immediately connects it to the ideology. They analyze manifestos, they examine radicalization, they ask how someone gets to that point. But when a trans shooter murders children, suddenly, ideology has nothing to do with it. Suddenly, it's just mental illness with no connection to the movement telling mentally ill people they are under attack and need to fight back. That's not journalism, that's propaganda. Patriots, it's that time again, so let me go ahead and bring this home. 2 days ago, Jesse Van Rootsteller, an 18-year-old biological male who transitioned at age 12, murdered 9 people in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. 5 children, ages 12 and 13, 1 teacher, his own mother and 11-year-old stepbrother. 27 others injured, some critically. Canadian police called him a Gunperson and used female pronouns while describing the massacre. They prioritized gender ideology over truth while children's bodies were being removed from a school library. This is the 6th trans or non-binary mass shooter in 8 years. The 4th to specifically target children in schools, and legacy media refuses to discuss the pattern because it contradicts the narrative that gender ideology is harmless. But it's not harmless. Audrey Hale's Manifesto showed murderous rage against little crackers with white privilege. Robin Westman's Manifesto said he regretted being trans and called it brainwashing. These aren't random acts of violence. They are the predictable result of affirming mental illness instead of treating it. Here's my question for you, Patriots. How many more children have to die before we are allowed to ask if this ideology is dangerous? How many more schools have to be shot up before the media acknowledges there's a pattern? Think about this with me for a second. We have got 6 trans shooters in 8 years, 4 targeted schools specifically. Multiple regretted their transitions. All had documented mental health illness, and in every case, the evidence gets scrubbed and the media refuses to connect the dots. And at what point do we say enough? At what point do we demand that confused, mentally ill children get real treatment instead of being told their body is wrong? Leave a comment, let me know what you think, because this conversation is the one they don't want us having. We can't let 9 dead and 27 injured in Canada be memory hold. We can't let the pattern be buried, and we cannot let ideology matter more than children's lives. The choice is simple. Speak truth now, or watch more kids die later. I know which side I'm on. Well, hit that subscribe, follow, and or like button wherever you're listening. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, your platform of choice. Check out O'Connor's Quick Strike on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for rapid-fire news, and this podcast, as always, drops on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Find me on X at O'Connor Podcasts. Share this episode. People need to understand what happened in Canada and why the media is lying about it. Have a great rest of your day, Patriots. Until Tuesday, hold the line unapologetically. This is John O'Connor, signing off.